that's the reason why I think we should push the Bitcoin mission even further, because if people are wanting to come back to El Salvador, when maybe they never dreamed of even coming back, of the possibility of coming back, if we can start doing that with different parts of Latin America, there's no reason for people to leave their homes and to try to find other opportunities somewhere else. We call it the American dream, right? Well, nowadays what we can have is the Bitcoin dream in your own home, or you can start building something with this technology that, you know, you can start building generational wealth within your own country, which is crazy to think about, because in these countries, the only people that get rich are the people that do a lot of corruption and stuff, not the honest people. So the fact that now we live 2024, you have the opportunity to build in your own city and not have to leave is something magical, because it is really painful having to leave your family behind, leave your culture behind. The food, it was really hard to find arepas, you know, that's what we eat.
Yeah.
So the fact that people nowadays have the opportunity to stay in their home and build something there is something so powerful and magical that we didn't have.
Camila, I'm so excited to be able to sit down with you. I love seeing that you brought your baby to the Bitcoin conference. And you were saying this is the third one that she's been to.
Yes, so. I have to bring my proof of work everywhere I go. And she's a huge part of my Bitcoin story, actually. So
I think you need to get a t-shirt for her that says, I've been to more Bitcoin conferences than you have.
Yeah, we're going to have to trademark that as well. But yeah, it's funny to think that she's won, and she's already been to 3 Bitcoin conferences in different parts of the world. So her first one was in Miami last year. Then she came with me to LA, and now we're here in El Salvador. Yeah.
So she's doing the rounds.
She is. And practice makes perfect. And it's always a little bit scary to travel with babies, but I think if you start early, you kind of get the hang of it.
Yeah, she's already got her passport.
She does. Her picture's hilarious. She's so tiny, and I'm just excited every time they stamp her passport. The world is in her hands at such a young age. So,
did they make you hold her up when she took it, or did they have her lay down?
I actually had her lay down on a white sheet and kind of just playing, trying to get her to at least, you know, smile or look. And then I had to crop out her hair because at the time it was crazy. So I photoshopped that. I don't know if I'm allowed to Photoshop passport photos, but we got the picture, and it's so cute. It's adorable.
We did it for my son at the post office, and they're like, he was, I think, like 1 month old at the time. And they're like, okay, you need to hold him up, but we can't see your hand. So I'm like holding him by the back of his head, up this, trying to
he's like, support the neck any way you can. Yeah.
Get the picture. I'm like, there's gotta be a better way to do this.
Oh, so, yeah. I was lucky enough to just lay her down, because that sounds very hard.
No, but that's so exciting that she's, getting used to travel already. And does she travel well?
Yeah, she does. Okay. And she loves airplanes.
That is nice.
Yeah, she loves airplanes. And back home, we live in Florida, and we live close to the airport. So she sees airplanes all the time and just waves at them. So she's used to them for sure.
So I don't know if you remember this, but we met the day of the announcement in Miami at that conference. And I think we were standing next to each other outside watching the stage when Bukele came on and made the announcement they were adopting Bitcoin as legal tender.
Yeah, I had no idea what was going on. I know we were in the hot sun.
It was hot.
It was really hot. And
I think you were really sunburnt.
I looked like a lobster. And what's funny is Safedine saw me. I remember that so clearly. And I did not know about seed oils at the time. So he mentioned it oh, you probably have a lot of seed oils. And I was like, I don't know what that means, but it was probably a burn. I educated myself afterwards, but yeah, it was a horrible sunburn. But I was so happy to be there.
Come on, you're Latina. You're supposed to be able to handle a little more
I thought
sun.
I was. I lived in Denver for 2 years prior to that, and I don't think I got as much sun as I should have, but that was the worst sunburn of my life for sure. But we were there listening to that announcement.
Such an exciting day.
And wow.
So I know a lot has changed for you since then. Obviously, you have a kid now.
Yeah.
Which, congratulations.
Thank
That's so
you.
exciting. I love seeing young families like excited to have kids and build a future. You don't see that in the fiat world that much these days.
Yeah.
But I also have seen like video clips of you at different places. I know you've been doing different media things, some in Spanish, some in English. And so we'll get to all of that a little bit later. But before that, I want to go back and understand how you came into the Bitcoin space, how you wound up in Miami at the conference.
Yeah. It's such a great story, and I have to give thanks to my husband for all of it. So we got married in the middle of the pandemic in 2020 and moved out to Denver together. And we had not lived together prior to being married, so I had no idea what his routine was on a day-to-day basis.
I love that. I love that traditional values. My wife and I did the same.
Oh, really?
So,
Yeah. And so when we started living together, to my surprise, the first thing I noticed is he would wake up and he would look at his phone. And it's like he was on Twitter a lot. And I did not know that he was, that obsessed with Twitter, let's call it, at the time, because every time you enter the Bitcoin rabbit hole, it just becomes an obsession. And I hadn't noticed that he loved to listen to Bitcoin podcasts. And so when we would get in the car, he would say, "Hey, babe, is it okay if I put on a Bitcoin podcast?" And in my head, I'm just like, I don't care. Go for it. I have no idea what it means, but go for it. And of course, he would put on Stefan Livera, which is a very technical podcast. Yeah. So it would all go over my head. And inside is like, oh, well, we're newlyweds and I don't want to say no. So yeah, go for it. And he didn't have anyone else to talk to about Bitcoin. So I was the default person. And he would try to explain to me like, oh, there's this guy, his name is Michael Saylor, and he's starting to buy Bitcoin for his company. This is something that, we've never heard of before. And in my head, I'm like, yeah, that's a cool story, right? And so he tried in his own way to get me interested, but I never really took the bait. It was more of, this is more of your thing. I'm going to try to focus on other things like getting a job, because we just moved to a brand new city. And he tried to get me to read the Bitcoin Standard. I said, oh yeah, it sounds interesting. I had no intention of reading it. And it wasn't until we had Thanksgiving dinner with his family where he was talking to his dad about it. It was like a table like this, and my husband was in front of me like you are. His dad was next to him, and I could just see the banter back and forth of my husband trying to orange pill his dad, and I'm just quietly sitting there looking at them, and the whole time he was orange pilling me, because he was explaining it to his dad in a way that he never really explained to me, and it got me really interested, and I said, hey, I'm going to read the Bitcoin Standard. He's like, yes, I brought it with me. And so I read the book on our flight back home. It was a long ride. And that is when I got very mad, because I realized that I did not know what fiat money was. That was a term I've never heard in my life. And when I noticed that they're stealing from us, and that the money I had in my savings account is being debased, and so that I'm being stolen from, and I had no idea. That moment was just like, I'm very mad, and I want to learn more about this. That was my aha moment. And so I started to follow what he was doing, which was go on Twitter, and I immersed myself in that world, started listening to podcasts, which is really funny because it was a toxic happy hour with Anders and Puppy and all of the memers. So I'm not sure that was the best educational content that I could have gotten, but their energy was just so amazing and they made it seem like a lot of fun. So I just immersed myself more in the world. Then for some reason, I thought it was a brilliant idea to start doing TikTok videos about Bitcoin and putting them out in the internet. So I had 68 followers on Twitter at the time. And these very silly videos that I don't know what I was thinking. I just put them out there and they started to blow up.
Really?
And I started to gain followers very, very quickly, to the point.
On both Twitter and TikTok, or mostly on TikTok?
Mostly on Twitter. TikTok at the time, not very receptive. But Twitter was, because there was an audience for it.
Yeah.
I don't think there was an audience yet for
And were you doing
TikTok.
these videos in Spanish or in English?
I was doing them in English. They were the silliest, not educational at all. I was just sharing my journey of what I was learning. And so it was, I'll have to find them and send them to you sometime.
Yeah. Do you ever go back and look at that? You're like, oh, that's a little embarrassing.
That's very cringe. What was I thinking at the time? Why would I put this out for the whole world to see? And that's something that happens when you post stuff on the internet. Your mind doesn't comprehend the amount of eyes that can potentially see this piece of content.
But how great, because a lot of times I think people overthink that. So that's why we need people that are new in the space to be out there posting stuff.
Exactly. Not even thinking about it. Just put it out to the world. Yeah. And if someone's going to receive it well, then great. You made them smile. You made their day. And that's actually how Swan found me, because of these videos, and they were seeing my growth so quickly that I didn't even apply for a job, which is insane to say. It was a blessing coming down from heaven.
So you were kind of thinking you needed to be looking for a job, and then they came to you and said, hey.
I wasn't even thinking about getting a job in the Bitcoin space because I did not know that was a thing. And I was going to start looking for a job elsewhere, and everything was still closed down because of the pandemic. So in reality, I had no plan. I had no idea what I was going to do. So Bitcoin Twitter really came to my life at the perfect moment. Bitcoin came into my life at the perfect moment, to where I started a career from there. And I still work with Swan today, and just seeing the growth that the company has had is incredible. And seeing all of the people, not only at Swan, but the Bitcoin community, just how it all has evolved in these last years is absolutely incredible. So I feel completely humbled to be a part of this journey. And to think that my journey started because of silly TikTok videos, it still blows my mind to this day.
Well, it's so funny that you were like the reluctant wife that didn't want to hear his husband's rants about Bitcoin, and now you're like speaking about it. You're educating people.
Yeah.
You have videos that are, in Spanish and English, like all over. So tell me about the type of content that you're doing right now. And there's so much out there right now. I feel like a lot of times, you're doing your own thing, and you're like, oh, wait, I didn't know they were doing that or this. So what type of stuff are you putting out?
So now what we're working on, before I had my baby, I started doing spaces in Spanish with Javier Bastardo, Lipto Bastardo. We started doing those together. And then...
So incredibly needed, because there's... It's much better now, but going back a few years ago, there was so little information in Spanish. There was like more than you could ever need in English, but in Spanish it was very limited.
Yeah, and we don't realize that we need people to step up to create these spaces so that other brilliant minds feel empowered to come in and talk and share their story and all the knowledge that they have. I always think that I consider myself a complete noob still when it comes to Bitcoin, still learning a lot. So when I open these spaces in Spanish and I have people come in and give their perspective, and they're so insightful, in my head, I think, how many more of these voices are out there that aren't, sharing their story until these small spaces come on, but it's so powerful. It would make such a huge impact if they continue to share, or if they had more spaces where they feel comfortable, maybe in their own language, to be able to talk about Bitcoin. So we're starting to take those on again every Friday. But now I'm doing them with Juan Fonseca, which he's another Swan. and they're just a lot of fun. They give me a little bit of an adrenaline rush. I am not a spokesperson whatsoever, but I feel that, okay, no one's doing this, so someone needs to do it. And I know that you guys are going to start doing more spaces in Spanish as well. So it's funny because at the talk yesterday here, we were talking about the whole debate of, do we need more women in Bitcoin? And it's, we need more women. Yes, we need more men. We need more children. We just need more humans in Bitcoin in general. And so whatever skill that you have to create a space where people can continue to have these conversations, it's so important. Just take the leap and do it, because we need so many voices. It's not oversaturated at all.
No.
If anything, we're so tiny.
Well, like you're saying, there's people that have the technical skills and the stories to tell, but they're maybe not going to ever start their own spaces, or they don't have any following or any way to actually get their story out. So somebody like you can open up that platform, and then you all of a sudden discover, you're like, where have you been all this time? Like, this is an amazing person with all this experience and can help people so much. And
it's happened. I've met, the spaces are still very small, maybe up to 40 people that actually stay the whole time. But you start to make friends with these people. And I've been able to meet some of those Spanish speakers when I've gone to Colombia or when I come here to El Salvador. And it's so crazy to connect the voice with the face and realize, hey, we really are in this journey together. You're a real person, and we really are making some sort of impact, which is super important, and it's what we want. We want to be behind the mission to push Bitcoin. This isn't about Camila. This isn't about just Mike. This is about everyone, and how can we continue to create a space for more people to join us.
No, I 100% agree. So you're starting the spaces back up, and then are you filming other, like, I know I saw you out here filming a bunch during this. Do you have like ongoing content that's out, and where can people find this? And I just want to make sure people know where they can find the content that you're putting out.
Absolutely. So right now I'm not creating video content for myself, which is something that people have been asking. And now that my baby's a little older and I kind of have the rhythm and, you know, a little bit more experience of being a mom where the schedule works, I do plan on doing more content in Spanish to help kind of have more resources in our own language. The content that I'm doing, so I work at Swan, but I'm more in the Pacific Bitcoin Festival side of things, where I do content creation and social media for them. And that's my team. Okay. I love my team. It's really cool.
I went to the conference this last year. They invited me as a speaker, and it was, I had a blast there.
Did you?
Unfortunately, I was only there for one day. My daughter's in school up in Santa Barbara. She had a medical issue, so I had to split for a day. But it just had a real fun feel to it.
Yeah.
And it's so close to, I'm originally from San Diego, so
nice.
It was fun to feel like, this is something happening close to home.
Just any reason to create a Bitcoin event where we can all come together, and because the energy that you feel at a Bitcoin event, being surrounded by Bitcoiners, by like-minded people, I keep telling everyone, it's like we have to pinch each other to see we're actually real people. This is not just internet friends or fake friends that you have on the internet. These are real human beings with real lives, with real stories. And so when you have all of that come together, it's a very crazy high to be surrounded by everyone. So I know some people are like, oh no, it's not worth going to these conferences, just stack sats. It's more of, hey, I think your life does change when you go to a conference, the connections that you make and the opportunities that can arise, because you never know who you can meet. And we've seen companies start popping up just by the connections people are making.
So many companies have sprung up, or job offers that have come out of, they didn't even know they were looking to move careers, but then they meet somebody and they're like, hey, you should come work for us.
And all that spreads the Bitcoin mission. The more people we have working in the ecosystem, and the more companies that start, popping up, the more we get to talk about. So yeah, go to a conference if you can, whether it's Pacific Bitcoin Festival, come here down to El Salvador. It's definitely worthwhile. Spend those sats.
Well, and that's one of the things I love about living in El Salvador, specifically in El Zonte, is it's become like a nonstop Bitcoin conference because you have Bitcoiners coming through all the time.
Yeah.
So there's we have meetups, we have dinners, we have just informal things, but you get so many cool people coming through. That's actually why I started the podcast. I had podcast was the last thing that was on my mind, but I was like, there's so many cool people coming through, and a lot of them, not the famous ones, but have like great Bitcoin stories, and they're here in El Zonte, and we can do stuff in person. And so it's like, all right, I guess we need to do a podcast now.
This was your mission. This was your mission, Mike. Yeah, this is great.
Well, I just enjoy it. Selfishly, I like the. People are always saying, you should do shorter videos, they get more views. I was like, but I like the long. I like getting to know people.
Yeah.
So if people don't want to watch that long, they can cut out after 30 minutes.
Yeah,
but
that's completely fine.
I enjoy the long format, just being able to delve into what makes people tick and what their dreams and ambitions are and where they see Bitcoin going from here. So it's been a lot of fun to do that. So you've been down to El Salvador several times now, right?
Yeah, this is my third time.
Okay.
I love El Salvador.
So
and it's the country where I never in my mind thought I was going to be visiting El Salvador, to be honest, prior to Bitcoin, just because it had that, we have friends from El Salvador back in the States, and you would just hear how, it's really dangerous or the gangs and stuff. So the first time I told my mom I was coming to El Salvador, she was like, "Is it safe?" And then
did your mom grow up in Colombia? Or
she did grow up in Colombia.
And was she there during the time where things were really bad?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm sure for her, she's like
PTSD completely. She grew up surrounded by that violence of the drug war that was going on, because we're from Medellin, Colombia. So obviously we have that kind of shadow behind us whenever
she's
someone
thinking,
says Medellin.
I got my daughter out of this, and now she's going back to this environment.
Which is really funny. Sometimes I joke, Mom, I'm going to move back to Colombia. And she's like, but I took you out of there. How are you going to go back? But yeah, it just comes from her past story of kind of being nervous about, where are you going? But she's seen that obviously Bitcoin is a big part of my life now. She is also a Bitcoiner, and she understands it, and she stacks. And so when I told her, hey, Mom, so the first time I came here to El Salvador was for the first Adopting Bitcoin conference. I was asked if I could host a Spanish-speaking panel, which was a lot of fun. That was the first panel I've ever done live.
Who else was on that panel? Do you remember?
It was man, I'm blanking. I know it was someone else
Sorry,
from
I don't
Colombia.
mean to put you on the spot.
No, it was like people that I've never heard of before. It was an author that wrote a Bitcoin book from Spain. I'm blanking in the names. Then it was, I believe he was a diplomat from Colombia that worked closely with one of the presidents, I was like, oh, this is insane. I forgot who the other person was, but it was such an honor to be asked to come speak, and how could I say no to that? So I told my mom, I'm going down. They asked me to do this. It's all for Bitcoin, right? So it's going to be totally worth it. And I came down with my husband, and that's the first time we actually came down to Zonte and experienced that.
So beautiful, huh?
Oh my gosh. It's, and the beers taste so good. There's some magic thing going on, because I do not drink beer, but the beer that I tasted at Bitcoin Beach was the best beer I've ever had in my life.
Just with the climate there and everything else.
It's everything comes together. So that was an incredibly beautiful experience. And the second time was actually when I was pregnant. We came down because of a graduation for Mi Primer Bitcoin to help the high schoolers do their final test.
The verification.
Yes, and
that's so fun to do.
Oh my gosh, my heart! I just kept looking at the kids and thinking, the power that you guys have in your hands, the knowledge that you guys have in your hands is so valuable that I wish every single young person, knew about this. But you guys do, and they're so knowledgeable.
Oh, yeah.
I was very nervous. I thought, what are they really gonna know? I don't want to fail anyone. That would be terrible. But they were showing me that they knew exactly what they were talking about, and all of them passed. And my husband was also impressed.
Did he participate in it also?
He did.
Awesome.
And yeah, it's just the future is very bright for the
Yeah.
youth of El Salvador. And that's what we want to see, more youth all around the world, Latin America, where they can see how much power you have in your hands with this technology.
It's amazing just the difference in the last 5 or 6 years, where before they felt like the only opportunity was to leave, to go to the
Yeah.
US, usually illegally.
Yeah.
And now there's like companies coming in. There's all these like programming initiatives that Stacy's been
Yeah.
kind of heading up. And so there's just like a sense of excitement and expectation that why would I want to go anywhere else? Like this is where everything's happening.
Exactly.
People are coming here. They're paying $1 million to get a Salvadoran passport. It's so crazy. It's like the world's been turned on its head.
Absolutely. And that's my story too. So my mom did decide to leave Colombia just because in her head she saw there was no opportunity within where she was. So Medellin is surrounded by mountains, right? It's in a valley, and
Beautiful city.
It is. It's really beautiful, and the people are beautiful. Food is great. Just the culture is amazing. It's just that when you start to learn about how the world works, the corruption with fiat money and everything is what kind of doesn't let those types of countries progress. And so she always thought there has to be more over these mountains, she would tell me. And so we moved to the States. I moved when I was 6 years old, and I had no idea.
Did you know any English at that point?
No,
Okay.
I only watched Cartoon Network in Colombia, and I would pretend that I knew what they were saying in English, but I had no idea.
You're like the reverse of my daughter. She came when she was about that age, maybe a year or two older, and no Spanish, and just thrown
You
into
pick it up very,
Yeah.
very quickly, though. And when I came to the States, I did not know that I was going to be staying in the States because my mom came first. And then 2 years later, I lived with my grandparents at the time. And then 2 years later, my grandparents brought me over to my mom. And I had no idea I was going to stay. In my head, I thought the United States was part of Colombia, just up north. I had no idea how big the world was. And so when I stayed, because my mom pretty much told my grandma, like, no, this is my daughter. She's going to stay here with me. I did not know I was going to be undocumented for 10 years. So I couldn't go back to Colombia for 10 years. And so it was growing up with the hush, hush, don't tell anyone you're undocumented because we may get deported, but we have our process going on. But that whole journey taught me the value of having low time preference and having patience. And if you have patience, good things are going to come. So when I took that lesson into Bitcoin about, low time preference is important. It's like you're talking to the crowd here. I know all about that. I've been through that experience at a very young age. I've practiced that muscle, so I'm ready to be a hodler and practice low time preference when it comes to Bitcoin because I know that, it's going to be worthwhile.
No, I know so many Salvadorans that have like similar stories and people I've become friends with online. Some of them I actually met in person at the Pacific Bitcoin Conference the last year. And I'm like, oh, you should come see. And they're kind of like, oh, okay. No, I get it. You don't have to explain. You can't travel. And so you see how many people are kind of stuck in limbo. And I've walked through that process with somebody we sponsor from Guatemala to come up and just like, it's like unending. You think you're there and it's this and the lawyer's fees and the just like unknowns and all the like fear.
Waiting for an interview.
Oh my gosh. So that's, I think people think it's like, oh, well, just do it the right way. You're like, no, you don't understand. Like how, think of the fiat system. The same people that run the fiat money printer are the ones in charge of this, but it's even more screwed up. So
it's a lot of sacrifice, and so that's why that's the reason why I think we should push the Bitcoin mission even further, because if people are wanting to come back to El Salvador when maybe they never dreamed of even coming back, of the possibility of coming back, if we can start doing that with different parts of Latin America, there's no reason for people to leave their homes and to try to find other opportunities somewhere else. We call it the American dream, right? Well, nowadays what we can have is the Bitcoin dream in your own home, or you can start building something with this technology that, you can start building generational wealth within your own country, which is crazy to think about, because in these countries, the only people that get rich are the people that do a lot of corruption and stuff, not the honest people. So the fact that now we live 2024, you have the opportunity to build in your own city and not have to leave is something magical, because it is really painful having to leave your family behind, leave your culture behind. The food, it was really hard to find arepas, that's what we eat.
Yeah.
So the fact that people nowadays have the opportunity to stay in their home and build something there is something so powerful and magical that we didn't have.
No, that's what I'd find. Most Salvadorans, they didn't want to leave El Salvador. It was just an economic, and during the time of the gangs, a lot of times it was a security issue too. But their dream was always to come back. So now you're seeing even a lot of the ones who have not been able to get their papers settled. They're still thinking, maybe it's time to come back to El Salvador anyways. And there's more opportunity there than staying in the U.S. And 5 years ago, nobody would have even thought that for a second.
No, so it's like you said, the world is upside down right now. And a lot of people aren't even aware of that, which is why we're still so early and there's so much work to do.
Well, it's so exciting for me to see Salvadorans finally coming back and visiting. Because before, when I told people I lived in El Salvador, just in general, they're like, that's kind of crazy. Aren't you scared?
Yeah.
But when I told Salvadorans that I lived in El Salvador, they're like, why would you want to live there? Oh my gosh, I would never go back there. You're going to die. I mean, they were the most negative on the country of anybody. But now those same people are hearing all these stories and they are coming back and seeing that the country's been transformed.
Yeah, and it's not only in the United States. I have family members from Colombia. We have our family chat, and you'll see stuff from El Salvador pop in our family chat where the conversations are starting, and it's just insane to think that if El Salvador could do it, other countries can also do it. And I know it is going to happen. It's going to take some time.
Yeah.
But I keep telling people, and I would tell the kids from the graduation, you guys are living the dream. This is what a lot of people wish that they were living right now. You are living in the future right now. So take advantage of that.
It's crazy because all throughout Latin America, you see that. Because I've traveled a lot in the past few years, usually Bitcoin related. And anytime you're in a taxi or anywhere, and they hear my broken Spanish, and they're like, "Oh, where do you live?" And so the El Salvador comes up, and they're like, Bukele, we need a leader like that here, and Bitcoin. And so you hear them where before you told people live in El Salvador, they kind of looked at you sorry for you. Now they're like, wow, you're so lucky.
Yeah. Or you mentioned Bitcoin and, Bitcoin's a scam. What are you doing? And now it's, did you see the price of Bitcoin? Where I'm not even checking the price of Bitcoin. Yeah. Family members in Colombia are telling me about the price, which is really funny, the transformation.
Yeah. So what do you see for you for the future? What do you see as work in Bitcoin? What's your kind of dream to build out?
I think my dream is I'm a very spiritual person and open to whatever path God has for me. I'm just going to continue going into that path. And I know that whatever I'll work on, it's definitely the education aspect of it. It's really important, but the entertainment one is also. So maybe I'll bring back some of those very cringe videos and to see if I can get more people to talk about Bitcoin. But anything that I do, or that I will do, my dream is just that it continues to help build a better future for my daughter. So the reason why I understood Bitcoin also so quickly and why I decided to take the opportunity right when I had it, when I understood it, was because my mission in life was always to grow up and become a mom. That was my biggest dream my whole life. But before Bitcoin, it was scary to think about how are my husband and I going to build something like a nest egg for our future children, where, you know, if we are bringing children into this world, we're doing it where they have what they need and, you know, the opportunities that we didn't have. And being an immigrant is like, okay, well, you know, I had my life. I want my kids to have a better life. And that's why our parents came here.
Yeah.
And so whatever I do in Bitcoin, I just hope that it helps further the adoption so that my daughter and all the kids, all the Bitcoin babies that are being born nowadays, which is a lot. I feel like there's a Bitcoin boom of babies just live in the world that we dream of having. And so I don't know what that may be, but I know that, you know, I love working with Swan, and that has helped me a lot with, you know, the learning and the education aspect of it. And whatever comes my way after that, I welcome it with open arms, an open heart.
So give people the pitch that they need to come to El Salvador if they haven't been here yet. What would you say to somebody? I
would say on the internet, we talk about Bitcoinization, or, you know, a world where Bitcoin is just the standard. Just come here and live it, because Bitcoin Beach has been living it for years now. And if you want to have that little taste of this is actually something tangible and real and people are experiencing it, you need to come down here. This is history right here. This is going to be in history books. And the fact that we get to live this whole moment right now, just take advantage of it and come down. It's crazy
to think like this will be a period they'll look back on.
Exactly. People 100 years ago don't get to live what we're living right now. So take advantage of that opportunity. El Salvador is beautiful. The people are beautiful. Food is great. And it's just such a pivotal moment in human history. People don't understand that, but in human history, that how would you not want to be a part of that and experience that?
Well, it's like it's one of those movie-like stories that you saw in the movie. You're like, that wouldn't happen in real life. This tiny little country that nobody cares about is like upturning the financial system.
Exactly. I mean, if you ask random people out there, many of them don't even know where El Salvador is on a map, but that's going to change it's already changing. Definitely. So that's exciting. Come to El Salvador, because it just fills your heart with that orange light.
I like that. That's a good note to leave on. But definitely want people to know where they can follow you. If there's people that are wanting to do more Spanish media stuff, how they can support you in that. So how can people follow you or get a hold of you, or what's the best way?
Yeah, I still call it Twitter, because I'm one of those, I refuse to call it X.
I'm the same. I'm like, it just doesn't.
Yeah. You can find me on Twitter at Camila Campton. My name, it was up there just all together. Perfect.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, just right there.
There we go.
I'm on Twitter. Send me a DM. More than happy to talk with people. If you want to join the Spanish shows, we do them, and I know we'll start back up next week. We do the spaces at 12 p.m. Eastern on Fridays. Okay. And so I tell people,
you should have done a show from here.
I know.
El Salvador, man.
Yeah, the little one needed me, but
I get it.
Yeah. No, I tell people, even if you don't speak Spanish, just join. You know, hang out and practice your Spanish a little bit, and just, if we make those spaces grow more where it will reach more people, that's probably the best way to help support the education aspect of it. So
if I join in, will you guys make fun of my Spanish?
No, you know what's really funny? We had someone join from Mexico, but he was an American, and he was speaking his Spanish. It wasn't perfect, but I understood every single part of it. And he was talking about how in Mexico, people really need Bitcoin. It's ridiculous that they have to drive 3 hours in order to deposit some money and then come back and stuff. And this whole time, I'm like, oh my gosh, this sounds so cool. So yeah, I'm probably gonna make you talk, Mike. I'm just letting you know.
Well, I'll have to have a couple cups of coffee and psych myself up for that.
Yeah.
Whenever they had, sometimes here I've had to do like the Spanish language news, and it's one thing when you're just like talking to somebody at a restaurant, but when you're like on camera and you're like, I I can't remember that word.
Even I say stuff that I shouldn't in Spanish. I call it Spanglish. It really is a thing. Just so many years not being in Colombia, and I'll sometimes say something that.
Well, I'm sure even in the U.S. with the Spanish you're speaking with people is different than Colombian Spanish, and so.
And my mom will be like, Camila, that's not how you say it. That's not a word. So yeah, be gentle with my Spanish as well.
All right, so make sure you follow Camila on Twitter, and we'll be looking forward to those cringe videos that you're going to start to re-release.
Yeah, I put it out there, so now I have to do it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Camila.
Thank you so much, Mike.